In 1889, the Montana Smelter Company moved its operations from Wicks 30 miles north to the Prickly Pear Valley near Helena, where a better water supply and access to major rail lines provided key advantages.
East Helena became a very important part of the industrial history of Montana, but it also became very important worldwide because other people around the world were aware of what's going on at East Helena. It was a very important industrial site.
ASARCO, as it came to be known, would exert a major influence on both East Helena, the community that sprang up around the plant, and the entire state of Montana. In 1935, a series of devastating earthquakes struck the Helena Valley. The top 200 feet of the acid plant stack, built around 1917, crumbled. The bottom half was capped and continued in use. The 400-foot center stack, built around the same time, fared better, thanks to its cement facing and steel reinforced construction. 3 years later, work on a new stack began. Designed to lift the cleaned gases emitted from the massive air filters of the baghouses, it would eventually tower 425 feet above the valley floor. In an era before strict safety rules were enacted, workers sometimes brought a daredevil sense of exuberance to the job. Shown here on the left, Pops, as he was known, survived his stunt without a scratch. The next 50 years was a period of technological improvements for the smelter and well-paying jobs for the people of East Helena.
The fellow workers were like one big family, really, and that's what they were, because most of them is from here, from East Helena, and there were several generations of family members that had worked or is working at the plant currently. And there are some fathers and sons and uncles, and so everybody knew everybody and had known them for probably most all their life.
Along with the prosperity, however, came a growing awareness of the smelter's impact on the environment.
So with a very short stack attached to a furnace, depending on weather conditions, wind conditions, sometimes the smoke would still settle in the smeltery and produce working conditions that were that affected the smelter workers' ability to continue on the job. And so they'd raise the height of the stack simply to carry the smoke higher aloft into the atmosphere and try to dissipate the smoke. So in that sense, the stack was to improve the environment of the workplace. Pollution concerns and efficiency concerns worked hand in hand to develop technologies that could recover flue dust, recover sulfur to make byproducts, etc.
As early as 1984, the smelter was listed as a Superfund site by the EPA, but ultimately it was economic reality that doomed the plant.
We had difficulty in the late 1990s securing concentrate in the open market, and that was a result of the global depression. Many of the mines had shut down. Many of the sources that we had relied upon for incoming materials were no longer there. That put a tremendous strain on the ability for the East Helena plant to survive.
In February 2001, Grupo Mexico, which had acquired ASARCO in 1999, announced a temporary closure of the East Helena smelter. 2 months later, the plant was in the news again. After more than a century of operation, the smelter would now undergo cleanup and demolition.
You are attending the pre-bid walkthrough for the 2009 cleaning and demolition plan that we have scheduled for this upcoming summer.
In May 2009, a group of demolition contractors gather at the smelter to learn about the scope of the project in preparation for submitting bids.
This gives you an idea of the perspective of demo that's going to have to take place here. All these concrete walls are coming down. This High Line Railroad is coming down.
This year's contract includes many of the smelter's remaining buildings, but the structures that have drawn the most interest are not the baghouses or the blast furnaces. Whoever is awarded the contract will be responsible for hiring an explosives expert to bring down the 3 massive smokestacks that have dominated the East Helena skyline for more than a century.
Those stacks over there is kind of the imprint of the community. I mean, whenever we go away for a vacation or whatnot, we come back and come over the hill and see the stacks. We feel at home again.
In July, ASARCO announces its choice. Cleveland Wrecking Company will be the general contractor.
That it will still go.
A week before the August 14th target date, Chester Grace of Dicon Explosive Demolition arrives in East Helena to supervise the preparations.
You prep most stacks the same way, whether they're concrete, steel, or like we have here, which we got concrete and brick here. You prep them basically the same. You make what's called a hinge point in each side, and the hinge point is to get the stack to fall the way you want it to. And then we also make what's called a mouth on the front side, and the only reason why we do that is to cut down on the amount of drilling and explosives it takes to bring the stack down.
Monitoring the above-ground parts of the operation is Ivor Johnson of the Montana Department of Environmental Quality.
We have done extensive cleaning to eliminate any toxic chemicals that would be released during the demolition. We have done asbestos testing, and no asbestos is present in either of the stacks, so we don't expect any release of toxic particulates from the stacks.
While Johnson monitors the demolition for the state, Julie Del Solio is the Environmental Protection Agency's agent in charge for the federal government.
There are a number of measures that have been put into place and approved by the federal and state agencies related to controlling dust when the smelters fall. The first one will include using water and creating what we call a wall of mist around the site that will create kind of a curtain of water to trap the dust particles as the smelters fall.
East Helena was a company town. They had minor league baseball team, summer picnics up McClellan Creek. They had a skating rink. Most of the people at one point that lived here were employed at ASARCO or the Anaconda Company. They were both there at one point. And over time, it changed, it evolved. People started to commute from other places, and not as many people that were employed there were actually residents of the city. The fire department, if they were employees at ASARCO and there was a fire call, they were allowed to leave and still be paid while they responded to the fire calls. And that just wasn't fire, but also EMS. So that was huge. We've definitely had a change in the number of people that are part of that fire department.
Well, the East Helena stacks are the icon of the East Helena smelter. Some of them are as old as 100 years in age. I know that when I come flying into Helena, I look out the window and the first thing I look for are the flashing lights on the stacks. In a month or so, those stacks will no longer exist. And no longer will that icon that represents the community of East Helena.
I heard something about we're actually going to have less than 200 holes in all three smokestacks. Of course, the number of holes is determined by the thickness of the outer shell. And so the bigger one right here behind me is going to have the most holes. It's going to have less than 120 holes. And it's going to take right at 60 pounds of explosives for that one there alone. And the other two combined is going to take less than 100. So we're going to have less than 200 pounds of explosives and to bring down all three smokestacks.
With 186 pounds of dynamite carefully embedded in the three stacks, the demolition is now set for Friday morning.
Try to anticipate everything that could possibly go wrong or possibly happen. And so when things go better, then you're ecstatic about it. And in this case, it went great. They kind of moved a little slower than I wanted them to.
The one did, didn't it?
The one did. I was holding my breath. I
Yeah.
almost passed out before it fell, but they did exactly what we wanted to.
Yeah, really beautiful.
Sarco environmental manager John Nichols says it was emotional to watch a part of his life for over 30 years disappear.
I must confess that a tear formed in my eye about the time the stacks were coming down. A very emotional time for me.